I'm Scott Dixon, and this is The Skinny.
From Fathead Studios in Speedway, Indiana, this is The Skinny. Welcome once again to The Skinny. We've got a big show coming your way. Stout and Rico, as usual, here. But inside the studio, we've got a fat cat, ladies and gentlemen. How about a 5-time IndyCar champ, the 08 Indianapolis 500 winner, a 4-time winner of the 24 Hours of Daytona, has won at least one race in the last 15 years consecutively in IndyCar, starting his 20th IndyCar season and his 19th season with Ganassi. Ladies and gentlemen, the Iceman cometh. Scott Dixon in the house, man.
Man?
Thanks for making some time.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely.
It's good to be here. Good to
right
be here.
alongside is a guy that has been with him for, we were talking about it this morning, we think maybe 12 years.
Going 12 season, yep.
That is Robbie Fast. Robbie Fast is his spotter and, of course, also drives the transport and takes care of coaches, and you pretty much crisscross the country all year long.
And then other spotting jobs at the 24 and 12-hour and NASCAR. Yeah, cover it.
Always on the roof.
Yep, if it's rolling, I'll spot it.
I've had the pleasure of standing next to that guy for a number of hours, and he's certainly been a big help to me. And Scott, I've got to think, I only raced a little bit. I raced in short course off-road, and I remember my spotter just being the absolute lifeline. When I climbed back out of the truck, he was my best friend in the world, and just that comfort of having that same voice has to be huge.
Yeah, it is big, and I think especially to the extent of IndyCar racing and oval racing, but even now, I did a couple of different races at the start of the year in the Bathurst 12-hour, which was weird because you had nobody kind of guiding you in situations, pit exits, pit entries, where you have a lot of the time. So you kind of just get used to it, and you don't really understand how much of a help it is until it's not there. So it was definitely that was very paramount earlier in the year this year. But it's just one of those things that you become so accustomed to it. It takes moments like the start of the year that you really notice the big difference. But the spotters are fantastic. Starter races, through the pit stop sequence, to even seeing, on ovals, who's utilizing what lanes and what other guys are maybe doing to pick up time. It's a huge amount of information that the drivers need.
And I would think, much like your crew chief, if you will, driver, engineer, the guy that you converse with the most about changes you want to make to the car, you just learn your own dialogue. Everybody has their own special way of communicating. When you say something, it might mean a little something different than another driver, so you two get in sync. But to have the same guy for 12 years, and Robbie was thinking maybe the longest standing current duo in the series right now.
I'm guessing that the only other possibility would probably be Rick Mears and Elio. But then now the Elio's just doing single events, but pretty much almost every race that Scott's been in since I've started here in 09, it was my first kickoff season at that month of May for Indy. Been spotting for for Scott ever since. And then funny thing is, when he does the 24-hour, even with through the Ganassi years, I've never spotted the 24 for him, I don't think. I was always on another car.
Yeah, you're always on the other car. Cheating on me.
Working against you, man. What's up with that?
I know. Especially when the other car wins. That really
well, you don't know. You don't know how he was spotting. Maybe he was helping you.
Yeah, maybe.
Good point. But no, he did fine, obviously, this year, too, because I was working on the third-place car with Sebastian Bourdais and those guys in the JDC car. But no, in that and just doing all the different NASCAR stuff, it helps me out keeping and starting off, like you said, at the 24, when you're doing at least half the race, sharing it with another guy, it kind of gets your feet going and gets your stuff back in the rhythm and stuff. And then, tests. We do tests at IndyCar for Ganassi, with Scott, so that we just do everywhere we go. I'll find a place, and sometimes it might be where he wants to put me too, rather than just picking my own, best place I can see stuff. So, like you said, for starts and restarts, and that's basically, but the test Monday, we needed help in traffic and just gapping ourselves. And that
like when you're doing the test at Sebring short course, and there's 14 or 16 Indy cars, like it's very easy to step on top of each other in a, less than 52-second lap, so it's all those scenarios where you're trying to get out of the way of, traffic and people that maybe are on a hot lap. the data has changed so much too these days. You're on the steering wheel at least to have a gap chart on who's behind you and who's coming fast, which helps, especially on race weekends. But you still can't change or exchange that for someone actually visually seeing it and telling you right away, because then you have a totally better understanding of it.
And my understanding, I mean, talking to the drivers, before the 500 when I've spotted for them, and talking with Davey Hamilton, the vision when you're inside of those cars is really limited.
Yeah, it can be. I think especially Indy, it's a lot of people don't realize how narrow that track is. Especially on the front stretch. With the wall right there. The back straight doesn't tend to feel as tight just because you've got the grass and it feels a little bit wider. But Indy, especially when you start getting 3-4 wide, man, it gets really stressful. Getting to figure who's going to lift first or who's going to bail out of it, or if who's going to try and challenge you to the corner, and it could be all three cars, or four. So Indy is definitely very unique because you have the switchover of the two, spotters as well. You have 1 and 1 and 1 and 3 as well. So they have to work very well together. So it's definitely a common ground of knowing what everybody wants to hear and having that sync, especially at bigger tracks like Indianapolis.
The Indy 500, such a special place, of course, for you. You've seen the highest of highs and the lowest of lows there. Winning it in 2008, you lost a teammate there early on in your career. And then, of course, that massive wreck that you had just a couple of years ago. And I was actually standing beside Robbie when that happened. Boy, that place has really delivered some crazy stuff to you along your way.
Yeah, it's that's Indianapolis. I think that's what it is summed up. Is the highs and lows. Are just can be pretty brutal, that place. But I think that's what is so fun about it, is the challenges. And one day, even in testing, it can be feeling easy, and then the next day it can just bite you in the ass. And I think it requires 100% respect every day, every minute of the day, testing at that place. The fine changes, because you're running, so far on the limit that, the ambient conditions or a shift in the wind, it can take it away from you quickly. So that's what I love about Indy. It's just that challenge. It's trying to figure it out. And some years, you just know when you roll off in the first couple of days of testing that it's going to be a much easier year than some of the others. I think in recent years, the manufacturers play pretty heavily in the shift of power that's delivered on certain days, and then once you get to Fast Friday or qualifying, you really understand where you've been sitting. And unfortunately for us, the last few years we just haven't really been in the race. It's I think we got involved in one of the crashes last year, kind of running in the top 8, but the previous year we finished 3rd, but it was more strategy that kind of got us there. Gone are the days where, we had a really good string of, runner-up positions, the occasional win that I had, at least in 08, and Dario had a string of them, through that period. So it's been a huge focus for our team, especially in the off-season of trying to understand where we've been getting it wrong and trying to reassess, some situations. But, hopefully Honda have stepped it up as well. I know that's been their sole focus in the off-season, has just been Indianapolis, and hopefully that plays true.
Yeah, talk about that race in its entirety for a moment. It seems to me, and I don't recognize I don't see it in other races as prominently as I do in the 500, but the progression of that race starts off, it seems as though, like you say, everybody kind of being respectful. Things can go wrong really quickly there early on, but it seems as though everybody bides their time through the first half of the race. The second half of the race, things start picking up, and it's noticeably how things start picking up. And then the restarts with a quarter of the race left to go, man, it is gloves off, 4 wide, people driving in the grass, and it always is mind-boggling to me. It's like, are they just that comfortable with the car now after being in it for that amount of time? Or is it the urgency of trying to get in the front at the end of the race? A little bit of everything. You can just see how much more aggressive they are at the end of that race.
Yeah, for sure. I think Indy's definitely become a track position race. Gone are the days where it didn't really matter too much where you started. You had plenty of winners from, back in, 15th and back. It is a little more difficult unless you have a dominant car, which you saw this year, or last year. I think, Pagano really had a dominant car. It was just one of those things that, even if he got into the middle of the pack, he was going to fight his way through. So, those years are ones that you definitely cherish and try to make the most of it. I think the race has changed a little bit. I think a lot of the new driver car combinations that we've had probably in the last couple of years, I think the urgency has become a lot earlier in the race. You've seen a lot more desperation, I think, earlier on. some of that is derived from, the style of racing that we've had too, where it is kind of tricky to pass. A lot of those passes need to be made in the first sort of 5 laps when the tires are really good, and you can, really stretch it on the high line or try and, make these, brave dives. So I think it does have a really, and each year changes, just how the pace kind of picks up and slows down. I think the first 5 to 10 laps of a stint, it's pretty chaotic throughout. And then everybody gets into a fuel save mode or trying to reposition themselves and kind of, you have a little bit of a lull. But it's full of emotions, I think throughout that day. And that's one of the hardest things I think to overcome is those highs and lows that even, we were talking about it from year to year in the race, man. It's crazy. Just, those peaks and valleys that you have, over a 3-hour period.
Yeah, the last couple of years I wasn't there, but the year before I was on Carlos Munoz, and I remember about mid-race or so, we were under a caution, and he said to me, has anybody gone to the top yet, talking about on the restart?
Yep.
And I said, I haven't seen anybody go up there yet. That restart, Rossi, around the outside, and passing people, and 3 wide in the short chute between 1 and 2. And I just remember, not even expecting that to happen, and immediately on the radio to him, outside, and he already had somebody inside of him. It's like, holy shit, we're going 3 wide here, man.
Yeah. Which those things look cool when they work out. But honestly, when you look at the I've watched that replay several times, and he was so lucky, man. So lucky that a couple of scenarios there where obviously, the driver on the inside had been respectful, because it could have gone so sideways in so many moments. But that's what it's about. There are situations where you've really got to take those, opportunities and bank on them, working out the correct way. But you've got a kind of a 50-50 shot there. So it's good to watch, and it's fantastic to see when things like that play out, and what Rossi did. That was really cool. And he seems to have gotten away with it a couple times, actually. A couple, 2 or 3 times, I want to say. And then as drivers, you start thinking, well, I don't know, man, it's worked for him 2 or 3 times. Maybe I should try it. Yeah, and especially when drivers start watching it, because that spurs the others on too. So you'll probably see a lot of that this year.
Hey, let's go back just a little bit, because I was doing a little bit of homework on you, of course, as I should, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that both of your parents ran dirt cars at some point. Tell me about that. What was that like early on in your days?
So my dad kind of raced a bit of everything at like a club level. He did rally car, he did dirt track. They owned a speedway actually in Townsville in Australia for a period of time. Actually, that's why I was born in Australia. All my family's from New Zealand, but they were working there for I think a 4 or 5 year period. They had me there while they were living in Townsville. And then we moved back to New Zealand, and then Dad did more dirt track racing, and then more of the kind of road course stuff. Kind of in the Benson and Hedges days that we had in New Zealand, were kind of big for racing there in Australia and New Zealand. So he loved to race. That's where all I remember growing up was going down to the garage and seeing my dad working on some kind of car, and I was trying to help out, and it kind of my bug started with motorbikes, as like a 3 or 4 year old, and then what triggered me into it was seeing my cousins race go-karts at the age of 7, and kept asking for a go-kart. But yeah, Mum did a little bit of racing. They would have like weekends where they would do I don't even know what you'd call it, like a mum and dad car kind of swap, and she would race. I think she was one of the ones that initiated it at the speedway that they were running at the time. And she would race too. I don't remember if she was very successful at the time, but it was pretty cool that they had that opportunity, and Mum did get to race a little bit.
Could you imagine that if you had a husband-wife switch off here in the U.S.? Well, you would have. They would be beating each other up before they ever got in the car.
I'm pretty sure that's why it didn't really last too long.
So for a number of years, I did this show called Lucas Oil on the Edge, and one of the shows that we did was actually in northern Indiana. I want to say it was a demolition derby, but it was the divorcee demolition derby.
It was in Cherville, Cherville, Indiana.
That's a great idea, though.
Kill cares.
Yeah,
it was couples that had been divorced, and they put them in cars, and somebody threw a green flag.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
That could be deadly, though.
We need to bring that back. Exactly.
It could be deadly.
Oh, you're not supposed to hit anybody in the driver compartment. Yeah, right.
There were some big hits, and ironically enough, it was the women that were really angry, man. They were handing some hits out. Like, finally, the muscles are even here.
I'm sure the guys were laughing a lot, though. But there's probably a lot of insurance plans taken out before that one.
Yeah, I know it's my ex, but I need to get a plan on her.
Yeah. yeah. But no, it's so that's how kind of my racing career started, and yeah, I guess just it was inevitable. My parents loved it. I have 3 sisters and a brother too, and one of my sisters raced for a long time, and so did my brother in go-karts. They were a lot older. I think the next youngest was 8 years, older than I. So, it was just a family thing.
So how far did you go up into go-karts, and then where? So I skipped out of go-karts kind of at 13. Just got into junior category and ran that for maybe a year and a half, and then started in Formula V's. So I think at that point I was the youngest. I think it was a Guinness World Record at the time was when I was racing open wheel at the age of 13. It's probably been beat now just with the age of some of these young kids. But there was a lot of controversy in the fact that we kind of got through a loophole in the licensing, because most countries you have to have a road bearing license before you can go for a racing license. But there was like a small, one-liner that if you could get a special dispensation by going and somebody watching you on track, and that's what I did. Which that was a funny story. I kind of went to Pukekohe, which is one of our bigger tracks in New Zealand, and I had to go around. It was in a Suzuki Swift. I don't know if you know. It's like a little 1200 road car, white thing. And I had to go around with a driver for Regan Morgan was the guy, and did a few laps, and then we came around the fastest corner. I don't know if you've been there. It's like flat out. In that car, it was probably only 100 miles an hour because it was so slow. But there was a family of ducks that were walking across the track, and I swerved to miss them. Spun the car, went in, ended up in the grass, and just stopped before the bank. And all I remember was that the driver sitting Regan sitting in the passenger seat saying, "Just hit the ducks next time, please." Please do not swerve to avoid the ducks.
By the way, no ducks were harmed in this show, and apparently at that racetrack. So
So that was the end of my practice day there. But
so let's go along in that same time frame, because you were 13 years old. Let's hear about the Nissan story, because apparently you had a pad strapped to your back so you could reach the pedals.
Yeah, so it was kind of within like 2 months, I had my first Formula V race and ran really well. I think I came like 3rd or something in my first race, or 5th, and then was passing another one in the second race of that weekend. We actually crashed in that same corner. I missed the ducks and broke the car pretty bad. But then, I think 3 or 4 races into my Formula V season, Dad thought it would be a good idea to do some endurance racing. And it was called the Nissan Sentra Cup, I think, at that time, which were all one-make cars. There was probably 35 or 40 of these things, and it was classic racing. It was like the old British touring cars, like
the Mazda MX-5 Cup.
Exactly, which is the best racing on any weekend, man, that we have. We sit in our truck watching that race the whole time, and it's so cool. But yeah, so coming around, I got past that corner this time where I missed the ducks, and it was like lap 3. So we shared the car, and I was 13. The regular guy was like 40 years old or whatever, and he thought it would be a good idea, since we were renting the car, that I start the race too, which we should have seen a mile off. And I got spun exiting onto the back straight and just barrel rolled this thing and destroyed it.
Wow.
But the worst part was, for the driver change to make it fast was, because I was shorter at the time, I had this big pink floral cushion.
You were 13. You were shorter.
It wasn't just a cushion, man. It was this big pink floral thing taped to my backside.
Oh, so it was pink.
Pink.
Okay, great.
And I get out, and I'm just bawling my eyes out, man. And it made like the front page of our biggest newspaper in New Zealand. And yeah, it was.
And then that was it. No more 13-year-olds could race. Way to go.
Not a good look, man.
There is video.
Yeah, I think, but the video, the one I've seen is pretty grainy. You can't actually see me crying, which is good.
These guys over here, Carl and Aaron, they'll find it. If there's video, those guys will find it.
Thank God there wasn't HD technology then.
Exactly.
They just saw the flowers on the audit and everything. So
so it was a pretty interesting start to my racing career, with lots of ups and downs. But the year worked out fantastic. I won the championship in Formula V first year and it was cool. That was cool.
So how do you transition here?
So then we went to Formula Ford. There was Class 1, Class 2. Class 2 was the older cars. Like, I think we ended up buying like a 1986 Van Diemen or something. I can't even. Oh no, it was a Swift. And then we won that year in Class 2. Moved up to Class 1. Won that championship that year, and then moved to Australia. Formula Holden, which is Formula 3000 cars.
Chevy
with a GM engine. And finished Rookie of the Year in the first year, won the Australian Drivers' Championship the following year, and then made the jump to America. But we were kind of on the way to Europe to start testing a Formula 3. And at that point, Kenny Smith, who was helping me, still racing, he's 72 God knows how many years old now. Like he's still doing the New Zealand Grand Prix down there. He knew Vern Schuppen and Stefan Johansson. They had an Indy Lights team. And on the way to Europe, we kind of stopped off in Sebring, did a 2-day test. First day was with Pac West Racing, and then second day was with Johansson. We ended up being the quickest out of the open test, and they did a deal that we couldn't refuse, and I never made it to Europe.
So it was not only was it the quickest, but it was a lap record, by the way.
Yeah, it was a good test.
Yeah.
Yeah. It worked out.
Out of the box.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was fun.
So what, you were 2 years at Indy Lights? Is that what I...
Yes, I did 1 year with Stefan Johansson and Vern's team. And I think we were, I don't know, Rookie of the Year maybe that year. We had one win, I think, in Chicago, and then went on to Pac West. And then I think we won half the races that year and won the championship. And
So how many Indy Lights were there then? Do you remember?
about 30.
Yeah.
28 or 30. It was big fields.
Do you
really
think
big
Roger
fields.
will get that back?
I don't know. It's a weird dynamic now, right? Because it's so split. You know, I think the whole Mazda Road to Indy, or I don't even know if it's still called that, is
It
kind
needs
of,
to be, but it's not.
It's kind of fragmented, you know,
Yeah.
and because IndyCar don't really have it under their, arms anymore, that it kind of, I don't know what they're going to do. It's kind of expensive too, you know, from some of the numbers that I was hearing. You know, it is pricey and it isn't.
1.5.
Yeah, but when I did Indy Lights, it was kind of, for the guys bringing the money, it seemed like every team had a guy that brought the money and then a guy that didn't bring as much money, and they were still asking somewhere between 900 and 1.3. So it hasn't really changed that much.
Right.
It's just that the IndyCar series has got so much cheaper. Gone are the days where it was 25-30 million per car. If you can scrape together $2-3 million now, you can get a drive. With all the factors of the leader's circle money and everything that gets tipped in. It's achievable. So that I think is where they lose out a lot. You've got people that are kind of skipping Indy Lights because if they can raise a little bit more money, they can go straight to IndyCar.
And that's the thing that we were talking about the other day when Robin was here, and I think Davey and KO and all of us were talking about. But you think about all the guys that came up. You have AJ, you have Mario, all these guys that came through USAC, raced dirt, did all the different stuff like that, and came up through the progression. Yeah, it's different now. It's way different. It'll never be the same again. But the problem is you have somebody like, again, Cody Swanson, probably the most deserving guy to try to get an opportunity, right? The most deserving since Brian Clausen would be my feelings of it. And, so we're working on trying to get Cody something in, the Indy Lights deal. And, it's probably $150,000 just to run the Freedom 100.
Yeah.
But, that $150,000 could turn into a career. It's kind of exactly what you just said about, Stefan Johansson's deal and that.
Yeah, I think if you look at my path, it was you couldn't write a book and have paid it as well. I was very lucky with some of the opportunities that opened up. We'd had a great group of investors. We were one of the first to kind of do the investment program. We had 14 New Zealand investors that kind of raised the money for me to kind of live and pay for the racing career. Which then had to pay back over a period of time as well. So it seems like that thing or that function is a little more common too, but it's still hard, man. It's harder now. The business model has changed so much, and it seems like there's such an influx of rich, wealthy families that are just piling in the money, and it's kind of a lot of the talent's getting lost.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I was just going to say the timing of it, I think, is what you were talking about there or alluding to. Is so critical, and a great example of that would be Connor Daly and Joseph Newgarden. Those two kids came up through the ranks side by side, up into Indy Lights here, and then Connor decided to go to Europe. Joseph sticks with it, wins the championship, and he spent some time in Europe as well, and things didn't pan out as well for Connor, just timing-wise. Certainly not lack of talent. Both of them, were very, very good, coming up through the ranks. And Joseph, despite having a team owner that passed away, managed to hang on, comes back over here. The timing of Sarah Fisher's operation becoming lucrative with money and wanting a young American driver, he falls right in place, and then it moves forward to Carpenter, and then it obviously delivers here in the last couple of years to Penske. But then you look at Connor, and Connor's still scrapping as hard as he knows how to stay in the hunt, and it's just funny how close it can be and go different directions.
Yeah, and even my, just because I know my career, any sort of sway in the timing line there could have shifted it big time. Even the Pac West, well, I think Tony Renner and I were the only people that ever got paid in Indy Lights history. I think we made, like 150 grand was the base, and we got a load of prize money. Like it was insane that we were getting paid to do Indy Lights, which was, I'd never heard of it, because when we went to try and do the deal, they're like, oh, we'll just put you on the same deal as Tony Renner. And then we saw the contract, we're like, yeah, sure, we'll definitely take that. And then, the Blundell opening and, that year later, but then even mine with Toyota's backing, and then, shifting me over to Ganassi when, that all went imploded at Pac West and they went bankrupt. It was just those shifts, could have not happened at any point. From Pac West, I could have been lost and left in the wind. So it's I totally get it. I totally get Connor's path and Joseph's path. Yes, they're both very talented, and they've won a lot of races, and it's good to see, I think, Connor get this opportunity this year,
I agree.
Hopefully it plays well.
The IndyCar deal and everything that's going on with that. I mean, I'm excited to see where it goes, but I'm also excited to see if we can't make it go a better direction as well, with things that happen with you. You brought up Toyota. Of course, we're very, very close with the Toyota family. And, I keep saying, so when are you guys coming back?
Yeah.
And they're like, quit talking about it. And I'm like, Roger's going to get you back. So when are you guys coming back?
Yeah,
So.
Manufacturers are important. I think even if you look at the driver programs they have in Cup, and it's just the feeder that they use, is you need unfortunately the manufacturers, and really IndyCar's missing that big time right now. I think with the two, we're very lucky to have such great brands, but they really need a third, or even better would be a fourth.
And that's what I was thinking whenever you said it's so fragmented with Indy Lights. That's where the big teams need to have that manufacturer support, to have that Indy Lights program to keep that driver feed coming up through there.
Yeah, it's hard. I think when you look at the history of IndyCar racing and Indy Lights, though, there was never really, none of the big teams really had Indy Lights programs. It was kind of, it worked because the steps were at that time when you were going to IndyCar, there was enough of a jump that it became such an ideal zone to go to Indy Lights, and if you did well, then you were going to get picked up, and then you were immediately paid. The problem now is the gap is so small. They just end up trying to dive straight into IndyCar, and you're kind of really just getting the people that have the funds opposed to the talent, which is a bit of a struggle. So it's, I think, who was there's been a couple just of recent, with VK and a few of those that are fighting through it, and doing well. Oliver Askew and Pato, I think with what McLaren's done, you maybe need that shift with some of these teams that are kind of going to just go with that younger generation and try it out.
Yeah, and that's what the whole Indy Lights thing, that was the thing that I was talking about. It's like, now it's like a lot of independence. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's somebody that still has the passion to race, but it's kind of what they can afford to do. Yeah. There's 4 or 5 people that own one car. They may run 3 or 4 races, and, it makes it difficult to keep it a full-time deal. But that's interesting when you were in it, what they had. And I've watched it over the years because, when we were heavily involved in sponsorship of Silver Crown cars, well, Silver Crown would run with IndyCar, or would run with Indy Lights, and Indy Lights would run with trucks, or we would be there with Silver Crown trucks and Indy Lights. And, I got to tell you, it's always interesting to watch, but now you've got Indy Lights, but you've got the Mazda this and that. So it's kind of
categories that are so close together, they're kind of falling on top of each other. But then kind of going to the oval racing, man, like it's a tough sell when IndyCar goes. Like I remember Pocono, we'd be the only thing on track. So when we're down for 3 or 4 hours, like there's nothing to watch. I remember going. When I first started, in Indy Lights, there'd be several categories running throughout the day to keep people, sort of interested. And Texas always do a good job of that with the trucks and the IndyCar, and at least there's action always kind of happening. They kind of really got to get rid of these lulls that we have, all these giant lulls.
That's why we're doing this show, by the way.
Yeah.
But
so we can fill in the lulls.
We can fill in the lulls.
We're in. That would be great. That would be great for sure. How exciting is it to be with one team for 19 years?
Most of the time it's exciting. It's like a marriage, it's up and down. But no, honestly, it's Chip and I think have, just personalities that don't, there's no conflict. I've seen a few teammates throughout my years, and you definitely see straight away the personalities that are gonna sort of inflict some pain. I think with Chip, fairly early on. But no, it's been great. I think there's very few people that have been able to achieve this length. I think if you look at team driver kind of combination, Elio's probably the longest lasting. I think he had a couple of years on me. He's not doing IndyCar full time, but no, it's for me it's been it was a game changer. The first meeting I remember having with Chip was daunting as hell, coming from Pac West, and it didn't, in my opinion, it didn't go very well. I remember walking out and talking to Stefan. I'm like, man, that was sucked. That was really bad. And because he had all the cards, right? So he's like, I earned more in my Indy Light season than driving for Chip in the first year. But I think that's what you need sometimes, and it's not going to be easily achieved. But I really respect Chip. I think him and my wife Emma are probably the two most competitive people I've ever met. And he never lifts, man. He never, each time he's pushing for more, and any situation, he always says, is there anything anybody needs? Does anybody need anything? Whatever it is, we'll figure out how to pay for it, and he just keeps it rolling. And a lot of respect for that, because I've been with a lot of teams in my junior career where it was not about finding speed. It was about dealing or making the product look better opposed to being fast. And I think when you look at Chip's semi-short career, the guy's achieved crazy numbers and across the board, and many different things. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel very lucky to be with this team. I love being with this team. It's family, and hopefully it continues for a while.
I believe this to be true, but only team owner to win the Indy 500, Daytona 500, Brickyard 400, Rolex 24 at Daytona, and, of course, Le Mans, and the 12 Hours of Sebring. I mean, six massively large, very difficult races to win, and he's managed to win them all.
It's nuts.
Quite an achievement, man.
It is. It's huge, and he keeps knocking them out, man. So it's good to be part of it.
I met Chip. The first time I met Chip was at Bill Simpson's suite.
Yeah.
And of course, Bill's in there running the show, and Chip's just sitting there, just listening to him. Yeah. Really not saying much. Yeah. And, but nice guy. I mean, it's a lucky guy to work for somebody like that as long as you have. So
yeah, he's demanding, and he has his quirks like everybody does, and like I do. But deep down, I think Chip's changed a lot from when I first met him. He could be pretty mean, and I've been in some meetings where I felt very small with him, and walked out and thinking that's probably my last year, but he's got a big heart. I think he values a lot of things that people necessarily don't see that out of him, and I think when the biggest thing, like when I've been part of the Dan Weldon situations or Justin Wilson's or anything, he's the first guy, man, in there trying to help and help in a big way. Whether it's the family side of things or down the road trying to make sure everybody's okay. So it's he's been a big part of my career and a big part of a lot of others.
I see a lot of that. I call it passion. I know you said in that moment he was mean, but if you take a look at his personality, and I don't know him personally, but just people like him, there's a lot of passion there. And so everything, if he's angry and he's being mean right now, he's going to be the meanest of mean. And if he's loving right now, he's the lovingest of loving. And if he's racing right now, he's the most competitive guy. It's just big personality, big passion. And when he's going, man, he's on the gas, and whatever direction it is, he's going.
Yeah. Most of the time, it's a fun ride, man. It's a fun ride.
Right?
A couple of bumps along the way, and you get to spend a lot of time with him, too. I mean, I know you're in and out and working with him. And you're sitting over there. You can't just not say anything the whole time, so we'll aim a couple at you.
This is pretty cool just to be here, to be honest with you.
The track's clear right now, so he's...
Yeah. Scott's not on track.
Clear all around.
So, yeah, it's just super cool to see that... that bond between driver and team owner, because so many guys bounce around, and I know it's all money generated, but it's so difficult to have that success, and certainly he's very happy with you. He doesn't want to see you go away, with what you've delivered to that team, and it's a difficult thing to do, and going back to what we were talking about before, the fans want to see stuff. I think the fans, they love people like you because you didn't come from big wealth. And this has always been a rich man's game. We might as well just hit it on the head, you know? It's never been something, you know, maybe if you go back to the midget days and in the 30s, 40s, and 50s when those guys were still building stuff in their own garage, it could be competitive. But for the most part, it still ended up as the guy with the most money could do the most stuff. And to have somebody come up, even if it was a timing thing that did not come from wealth and makes it to the top, people love that, man. They want to just know that there's a chance.
Yeah, it's definitely, you know, I think that you know, a lot of people do forget that and brush over it, I think, in some scenarios. And you know, I personally respect, you know, the people that do achieve it that way a little bit more. But you know, it is hard because, you know, even through the junior categories, you know, having the resources makes a big difference, you know, and you see that in karting to this day. Like, I don't know if you've been to a kart track recently.
It's incredible.
God, the amount of motorhomes and trucks and trailers.
Yeah.
The amount of money that people are spending is crazy. You know, there was no chance in my junior category that I could have even, you know, my parents, there's no way they could have achieved that. You know, we were rocking up with an open trailer and, you know, and that was it. But you know, it's good to see. I think a lot of people that still have the passion for the sport. It's just that it's changed a little bit right now.
Yeah, 2006, we were running national tour, running Stars of Karting and Manufacturers Cup with WKA with Robert, and we spent about $50,000 on karting that year. That was 2006. I want to say it was 2012, 13, 14, somewhere in there. We were talking to a karting family, and that was $100,000.
Yeah,
you know, and I'm sure it's north of $100,000 now.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, for me though, it was all about that camping. Like, that's what we did. You know, we couldn't afford the motels or hotels. You know, we'd pack a tent and, you know, we'd sleep. That was the kind of cool thing about, you know, the New Zealand series. They were always in the summer, and you would, you know, it would be just like a big touring carnival for 8 to 10 weeks. You know, you'd kind of go from, you know, school holidays always, and you'd go from round to round to round, you know, sleeping in a tent. And it was fun, man. Those were the best days of my lives. Was, you know, living at the track and you know, waking up and, you know, sort of cooking some bacon and eggs and get on the track and race and then do it the next day too. You know, so it I don't know. New Zealand was a lot of fun, and I think the series, you know, right now I think Toyota series down there is doing really well just because of that fact too. And it's off season. A lot of Europeans still going down there. But yeah, those were probably the best memories I've had of my racing career.
So I'm not going to jump into this too hard. I'll let you take it as far as you want to go. But rumor has it that your dad joined the Blue Man crew at one point and was not very happy about it. Can you tell us any of that story?
Yeah, I could tell you about that story. That was at Miller Motorsports Park, and I don't know if you were around then. Maybe so. It was during IMSA.
Yeah.
And I was, I think, the second or third driver on one of the cars for that weekend. It was in between the IndyCar season. It was an off week for us. And then we had to, it was weird though. We tested like on a Tuesday at the track. And then we had like Wednesday, Thursday off. And then, you know, back on track on Friday and for the race weekend. And so we were doing nothing. And then, you know, someone's like, hey, we've got some moonshine in one of the motorhomes, and, you know, there's nothing to do out there. So we're like, okay, let's start drinking some moonshine.
Salt Lake City, yeah. That was way at Tuella,
yeah. Which is a dry county too. Right. And so then everybody's probably had a few too many. And then my dad, we see him walking over to a Portaloo or Porta-John or whatever it's called, and I was with another person, and they thought it would be quite a funny idea to rock it. So we rocked it, and it was actually sitting on like a curb. So it was on top of the curb. So actually, when we rocked it, I feel like I wasn't the one that rocked it that much. But as it turned out, this thing rocked all the way until it tipped over, and of course it tipped door down, right? So
oh no!
All I remember is like I'm trying to lift this thing off him, and then I see him. He's just covered. He's blue. He looks like a Smurf. And then I see this like bright orange turd sitting right on his chest, and he's trying to hit me. So I'm like, I put it down again, and I run off. And so yeah, long story short, it was a bad day for my dad. He was not real happy about that, as you can imagine. And actually, that weekend got worse. I think he then got in a car accident in my rental car, which wasn't in his name, wrote the thing off, and of course somebody had to pay for that too.
The weekend literally turned to crap.
Yeah, for a weekend that I was helping Chip out, not driving for any money, it cost me a lot of money. And my dad still hasn't let that one go.
Your dad's dignity on the way there.
Yeah,
right?
I'm just glad there wasn't many people there that well, I don't think there was anybody there that witnessed it, but he definitely remembers. I remember going to the hotel that night and apologizing, and he was still, for days, he was still a tinge of blue. I don't know how hard it is to watch that stuff off, but I feel extremely bad for that. For
Racetrack
sure.
memories,
Oh
man.
Oh man, it's yeah. I've tried to let that one go, but that one seems to keep popping up.
So you've had a day and a half in the car. You've actually had a little more time than that with the windscreen, right? Didn't you test a little bit last year with the windscreen? A little bit,
yeah. We did earlier on, I think, with the different version, which was the just the screen portion. And then it changed, I think, later in the year, which I did Indianapolis and then also Richmond, which there were 4 tests, I think. There was Indy, Richmond, and 2 Sebrings or something like that. Oh, no, there was an Alabama, a Barber. So, yeah, it's been pretty good, man. I think, the whole, conditioning from PPG and Red Bull Technologies, I think that what everybody knew and then put together, I think was a huge jump. But I think the way that, Red Bull have been through this process on the F1 side for a little while, so they had most of it developed already. So it was pretty seamless, and I think through the COTA test, which was really only about a 5 or 6 hour test day, and then Sebring, obviously no issues. COTA had some rain, so it was good to finally test the screen to see what was actually going to happen. But I think there's still that rare situation like we had at Detroit Race 1 this year, where it rained. It started as a wet race and went dry. And because it's a concrete circuit, it has that kind of concrete dust to it. And when I actually crashed in that race, but when you were taking the tear off, each time you would kind of get the spray, it would be a milky white, and you were just peeling through tear off. So that's kind of the only scenario I think that may be an issue, because you can really only pit and take a tear off. But if it happens every kind of lap or two, then I don't know what you're going to do. So there is like a drop dead situation. I think that the glass portion can come out and just have the halo, which on a street course I think is sufficient enough for sure.
Is there a low pressure area when it comes up over the windscreen where that dirt and dust can collect on the inside of that? Does that distort vision?
Yeah, no. So from the inside, not at all. The first few lenses that we had did have some distortion in them, and it was kind of, for whatever reason, it was always kind of the low left side, which was where you need it for the ovals, and that was a bit strange, but they said it was just kind of a production kind of issue that they'd had, and after that there's been no scenario over that. I think the first street course will be a little tough. I know when I first jumped in at the Speedway at Indianapolis, the kind of just your visual or peripheral perception of how close you were to the wall, because you're looking through another lens. I wear contacts, I have a visor, you have tear-offs, then you have another lens, then you have tear-offs. There's a lot of dimensions you're kind of looking through. So that was a little, probably the first 4 or 5 laps, I think kind of just figuring out how close you were to the wall, which on a street course I think could be interesting. I think especially for the first 5 laps, maybe the first session. But what they've done, and the cooling was an issue to start with too, because when you're doing 200 miles an hour, the airflow is pretty good, but when you start to enclose that was a big issue. So they've opened up a lot of front nose area, and then also inside by the shock area or panel on the front now, pushes air into the cockpit. So there's a lot of cooling, and even now we're running a helmet pumper. So there's a deflector on the outside of the car that runs a tube to the helmet too now, which gives us more air as well. So it's they've definitely covered all the bases.
Wow, well, that's great stuff for sure. We'll see how everything pans out, and a few changes there. I was surprised. I was surprised to
spotters
find
more
out.
important, Ken.
Will it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that mean does our rates go up?
That's right. Robbie's going to get paid more this year.
I heard they got heads-up display and they don't need you anymore.
Well,
That'll be
that's the funny thing. In the GT car, they had that too, and I thought we were going to be, what's the point of having us, But then there was a lot of drivers that didn't, on our car for sure didn't. You didn't really use those that much. I don't know if you did much in the GT.
Those were good for, so those have radars on them too, the ones in the GT cars. So it gives you a good perception of how fast the car is coming from behind. So it could help you at night a lot, to know if you're racing another GT car or if it was a prototype coming through. Just because it would have speed arrows that would come up on the picture, with it looking back on the other cars, which was handy. But the one on the Cadillac is kind of pointless. Like it's right in front of the rear wing, so all you get is a really good view of the rear wing.
Yeah,
and
Sebastian
you
didn't
can't
like the one.
You can't see anything else behind it.
The
It's
one on
like
the
the camera needs to be on the wing. I don't
Sebastian said the same thing. He said he didn't even bother.
And it's like way up here. So
Yeah, it's up.
to be
You have to look
driving,
out and up.
Our drivers, I was telling Robbie earlier this morning, we had breakfast together, and at nighttime it's just blown out. You know, when the headlights are coming up, the rear view camera, it just blows the whole screen out, so they don't even want to look at it, almost like turn it off because it's so bright to their eyes.
The technology is pretty trick now though. Like the stuff we use at Le Mans for the GT program was insane, and especially when you know the prototypes there are so much faster than the GTs. Like it created a lot less accidents, man, just because you knew somebody was coming, and they're a huge safety
How
device.
far back does the radar pick somebody up?
It's quite a ways. I don't know the actual, but you would know for at least 5 seconds how fast this thing was coming, and you know you could clearly depict if it was a P1 car or a P2 car or a GT car. Like they're good, man, really good.
That's amazing for sure. I knew the Corvettes they had some wicked
really
cameras
nice
inside theirs for a number of years now, and obviously you being in the P cars, so much most of your stuff is out of the windshield. But I was blown away at how close the GTLMs and the GT cars were this year. I mean, the speedway speed was almost identical. I mean, they could get into the turns harder. You know, the brake zone they were better, and then coming off the turn they were a little better. But sheer speed, there was not much difference.
Yeah, it kind of changes each year. I think with the difference between the categories for sure. Are you talking about Daytona at least?
Yeah, Daytona 24,
yeah. You know, it's the GT category is always the best race, I think. Like it's flat out, man, and like you can rub on each other a little bit too. The prototypes are still kind of a bit delicate, but the GT had a lot of. It was weird, I ran I think 11 years in prototype and then did 4 years of the Ford GT program, and then this year coming back into the prototype, it was actually quite nice to only look forward. Like most 90% of the lap previously, you were looking in the mirrors because the prototype cars would just take you out, man. They'd waste you. So it was but it's part of it.
Yeah, no, super cool of you to take the time out. We know you're a busy guy, and a million people want a slice of it. So thank you very much, and man, we wish you the best of luck this year. And I know you can beat them going fast when they give you a fast car, but you've got the ability to beat them in a slow car. Between you and Mike Hull, and your ability to save fuel and his ability to strategize is just unparalleled, man. Incredible team.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. It was a real pleasure. I'll be back for sure.
I love it.
Awesome. Very cool. Spread the word, man. And Robbie, can't thank you enough, pal.
Thank you.
I know,
appreciate it.
You're a big part of making this happen as well.
Absolutely.
So thanks a lot, man.
No worries.
So there you go, guys. Another edition of The Skinny. Scott Dixon, Robbie Fast here in the house. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching this episode of The Skinny. Be sure to check out all the latest sun and optical eyewear at fatheads.com. Special thanks to our sponsorship partners at Elliott's Custom Trailers and Carts. This has been a production of Fathead Studios. Please remember to subscribe.